This week on 100% Chance of Wine, I'm here with Josh Maloney. And what I love what you are doing with your wines, it's something unique.
Yeah, so what I'm doing for this label is, it's a very unique approach. I only make one wine every year. What I do is I source 1 acre of Cabernet Sauvignon from one vineyard. Then all the winemaking techniques that I employ, that vintage, are meant to exemplify what I think is unique about that site, to really bring out the terroir for the Cabernet Sauvignon from that site. The next year, I go to a different vineyard, 1 acre of Cabernet Sauvignon, different winemaking techniques, and my goal is for the life cycle of this project that I will never revisit any of these sites ever again. So every year it's one vintage, one variety, Cab Sauv, one vineyard, and then when it's gone, it's gone.
What sparked this idea?
So I started the project in 2012, and I knew long before I started my own label, I knew that I wanted to make a Cabernet Sauvignon based wine. I'd been working with Elephant Mountain Cab Sauv at Chateau Ste. Michelle for years when I was the red winemaker. And I loved it, and I thought that it was a really undervalued site, that not a lot of people knew about it, and it produced some extraordinary wines. So I brought the Cabernet in from Elephant Mountain, and I fermented it, and I got it down to barrel, and I loved it, and it was looking beautiful. And I was thinking ahead already in my mind 5 years from now about making the same wine every single year, and I was already bored. The wine hadn't actually finished malolactic fermentation yet, and I was already bored with the project. And so I thought about, well, what if I got different fruit next year? Well, that would require different techniques. Well, that would actually be kind of fun and a challenge.
How do you choose your vineyard each year?
So I actually have a fairly long list of vineyards that I want to work with. You can imagine there's been a number of wine professionals who've told me this is not the smartest approach to winemaking because it's so unusual. And one of the criticisms that they give to me is that you're going to run out of vineyards. Now, I know that you and I very quickly sitting here could probably come up with 30 or 40 vineyards that are worthy of visiting, and I don't think I have 40 or 50 vintages in front of me right now. So part of it is that tasting wines of friends and colleagues that I admire, and going to their cellars and tasting through their barrels and realizing that I really like the wines from Dionysus, which is where I got my 2014 from, or working with other colleagues and meeting other people who've made wine from, say, like Finney Hill, and then going and meeting those winemakers and tasting their wines, and then meeting Dick Bechtel, the owner of that, and getting introduced to that fruit. So a lot of it's kind of happenstance.
And it's more than just choosing your vineyard, it's what goes into it afterwards too.
Yes, I've actually got all the notes published on the website for everything I've done to these wines. The harvest dates, the chemistries, the yeast selection, the barrels that I use, how much time was on the skins, the cat management program, all of it, I publish it. In part because I find it interesting, and I think a lot of people find that the more that they can learn about something, the more they enjoy it. Some people have criticized me about putting that on the website as well, saying, you know, if you publish that, won't everyone just try to reproduce what you've done before? And the truth is, I couldn't do it if I wanted to. You know, a lot of this is vintage related, and serendipity plays a big part about how these wines turn out.
I mean, you have such an extensive background in the wine industry. Do you still find that year after year you're learning new things with how you're doing it?
This project teaches me something all the time, and it teaches me something different every single year. And that's why I struggle to really explain to people what I'm trying to show in giving this project to everyone, because I don't know what it's going to be next year. You know, what it meant to me in the beginning is not what it means now. I'm at the point now where I've got 5 wines in bottle. I'm going to be releasing the 5th one this April, so coming up. I'm doing a pre-release soon for it as well. And in the process of tasting all 5 of them together, the differences are so extraordinary. And I think it's really what makes this project special and beautiful. And I think that's what I'm taking from it right now, is that differences make people beautiful, not ugly.
So now what I would like to do is try through each year so we could taste the differences, and I would love you to explain what you're tasting and some of the fun facts about each year.
Fantastic. Really quick, people might look at the screw cap and ask a question about that. I want to talk about it really quick. I decided very early on that because I'm taking such an untraditional approach to this, that I can throw a lot of conventions to the wind. And screw caps don't get cork taint. And most importantly, there's very, very little bottle-to-bottle variation. I'm working so hard to get these wines to a very specific place. I don't want to take a chance on a piece of tree bark to protect them for the next 20 or 30 years.
Right.
So it might not look as romantic as the traditional cork, but it's much safer.
Okay,
So-
that's good to know.
So the first wine is 2012 Elephant Mountain Vineyard, Rattlesnake Hills. This block was planted in 1999. And the wines from Elephant Mountain always impressed me because they had so much concentration and color and tannin and acid. It's a later ripening site, but it's also got incredible intensity, and it's got this very unique element in the nose, which I've not seen pretty much anywhere else in Washington, that reminds me of fennel or black licorice.
Coming out of the bottle, how happy were you at the taste of this?
I'll be honest, when it was first bottled, I was moderately happy with how it turned out. I was predicting that the wine would be a little closed down when it was young, maybe a little angular and a little rough, but then it would slowly evolve. And what I've seen with this project, that reliably, it takes about 2 to 3 years for these wines to really start to open up and blossom. So when it was first bottled, I was like, okay, that's pretty good. But then about 3 years later, tasting it, at that point, I'm like, this is as good as I hoped it would be. And then a year or two after that, it turned into this is better than I hoped it would be. So then the following vintage, 2013, I went to Scootney Flats on Red Mountain. There's a really savory herbal element that I think is really unique to Red Mountain. And there's some red cherry as well. The aromatic element that I'm most pleased about, that has only emerged in the past year, is like a raspberry compote.
Okay.
You know, I will say that it's not been one of the favorites for most people until recently.
Okay.
And that's why, I mean, these wines, they kind of, you know, the flavors, they ebb and flow. They kind of come into focus and then back out of focus. And I think you're going to see that when you taste across these, is that they're in different stages of evolution. And they follow curves that I can kind of predict, generally speaking, within maybe 6 to 12 months. I was worried about this one because it was dormant for so long, and then it finally started to emerge, like I said, about a year ago, and it's really starting to blossom now. So moving on to the 2014, which is Dionysus. Now, I was introduced to Dionysus Vineyard because I did a bunch of work with Dusted Valley, and they work with a lot of fruit from Dionysus, and I was really impressed by just how much density and richness there was to those wines. I got into a really nice parcel, and this was a really, really warm year. And all the techniques that I employed, I was trying to take that really dense, luscious mouthfeel and almost over-exaggerate it, make it as big as possible. And in the process, I found this black raspberry preserve character in the nose that I was not expecting, but I love it.
Right.
2015 is from Finney Hill Vineyard in the Horse Heaven Hills. I've always loved the wines from the Cabernet in particular from Horse Heaven, because I think it's the most old world, most elegant. In this one, there's I think most of these wines so far have been predominantly fruit with sort of spicy and herbal notes behind it. I think this one leads equally with fruit and with a savory herbal component. It's not just straight up fruit. I think it's far more complex. The mouth feels full, but it's not big, especially compared to the Dionysus. And then it's got a very long, elegant finish to it. And I think at this point, this is usually where most people kind of look at all the wines and they say, I can't believe these are all Cabernet Sauvignon, because they taste all so completely different.
Yeah. Okay. Last one.
Right, so this is the wine that was just bottled last July. This is 2016 Quintessence Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon from Red Mountain. Obviously, it's the youngest of them all, so expected to be the most kind of tightly wrapped and less open about its aromas and flavors right now.
Okay.
So you can see hints of the fruit, you can see hints of the herb, but I think you can also get a sense of the power that's lying underneath it.
What do you hope when someone tries through all these wines? What do you hope is their takeaway?
What I really hope that people get from this is that they get to see what I see as a winemaker. They get to see that these little nuances, these little fleeting images of things that are special one year but then they're gone the next year. They get to be a part of that and realize that that's really what makes this precious. The tradition is nice, the romance is nice, the sense of permanence is nice, but it's the ephemerality of this. It's the knowledge that this is here now, but it might not be here forever. I think that's really what makes it special, and that's what I want to share.
This week on 100% Chanso Wine, we made our way to Kennewick. And what I love about the wine segment that we do, you get to tell the story of very small wineries that just got started, and you are one of those. I want to have you say the name of your winery because it's so unique.
It's Naoi Cailini Og.
Where'd that name come from?
You know, it's Irish, so it's Gaelic, and my maiden name is Flynn, and so I am Irish, and I have 8 sisters. So there are 9 girls in my family, and what that means is 9 young maidens in Gaelic. And so I thought that was appropriate.
And you're in a unique spot in Kennewick. Mm-hmm. You're in a neighborhood. How did you get started with your winery?
Well, I bought this house. It had 6 acres. And I was concentrating on finishing the house, and I realized I had all this land to develop. And I certainly didn't want to water and mow 6 acres of grass. So I thought, you know, it'd look really beautiful if I surrounded myself with a vineyard. So we planted 3,000 Carmenere plants here, and now I really just wanted landscaping. But now I have this really wonderful site. When we first picked them and tasted it, it was so great that I said, okay, fine, I'll bottle it. I was just going to sell the fruit, but now we're into labels and bottles and bottling because it really is great tasting stuff.
Wow, and I'm sure I would assume loving getting to create the label. Is it done yet for the bottle?
It is done, but you know, it's really hard to do. There's a real difference, I think, between being a fine artist and being a graphic artist, and I worked trying to do this label, and I wasn't able to do it. I finally hired a company that would make the label for me, and they did, and it was really beautiful. But what I did is I made a bunch of drawings, and I had grape clusters and the sisters. I've got a drawing of the sisters, and I've got the vineyard and things, and he was able to take those drawings and incorporate them into the label.
I'm assuming quite a learning experience for you.
Yeah, in fact, that I could not have done it without the consult of the winemaker. You know, I mean, he was right there with the schedules of things and showing me how to test for the ripeness of the fruit and what you do in certain circumstances, you know, how we protect them. And it's big learning curve, but it's been great fun.
Going through this whole process, and what would you say to someone who's just, you know, maybe looking to start their own vineyard themselves? Kind of the pros and the cons, things that you've had to go through over the last couple of years.
I don't know any cons. It's been just the most wonderful thing. It was really funny. I really hate gardening. I hate it. I don't even like pruning roses. And it was amazing. I first walked out here and there's all these brand new little plants. And I said, what have you done? I mean, it was the last thing I wanted to do was garden. But it is so fun to plant them, to every spring just watch these little buds come out, see the teeny little clusters, and just as they develop and you take care of them, you make sure they're not too cramped in there, and you're spraying and you're just watching. They're just like little babies out there. That it's just so very, very fun, and I don't know a downside to it at all.
And I'm curious, how do your neighbors feel about the vineyard being so close?
You know, the only comments I've heard is how beautiful it is. I think that the house sat here for so long in a real disastrous state and weeds everywhere. And it's taken me a little while to get it up and going too. And I think they're just really grateful that it looks really lovely instead of the way it did for so long.
You guys are a family-owned winery that started up, back in 2016?
13.
13?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about how you guys got started up.
Well, I was working for another winery at the time, and there were some grapes in the vineyard that I had my eye on, some Tempranillo, of course. And I talked the owner into letting me buy some fruit, make it in their cellar, get licensed, and then start selling wine out of our car, basically, just to start. And then a couple years later, we were able to release those wines and have a party and start a wine club. And then the following year, the tasting room.
Why did you guys want to start up a winery in the first place?
That's your dream, babe.
Okay. Well, I think
Mine now too.
When places like the Prosser Wine Circle opened and wine became more of a cultural experience in this area, my family kind of jumped on it, and we started having wine from all over, not even necessarily just Washington wines, for dinner and get-togethers and things like that. And I think we used to joke about, we should have our own winery someday because we loved it so much. But at the time, like looking back, we never would have thought that would have actually happened.
Right.
So I joined the Navy after that, and then got out and went to college and kind of became disinterested in what I was majoring in. And then I think my mom said, "Hey, WSU has this ad in the paper today about, the Tri-City, wine program."
Right.
So I just kind of on a whim said, "Okay, I'm going to move home and do that."
It's been good ever since?
It's been great. I mean, I was a business major, so going into that program where it's all biology and chemistry and, plant science, it was quite the change. So I basically started over, but I loved it, and it really has paid off. The program's great.
How is it working together as a team?
It's awesome. I actually got my degree in business management because I wanted to open up a coffee shop, to create a space for community. And so it's cool because it manifested in a totally different way. And I'm super grateful. And it's been challenging. It's challenging to work with your spouse, but you learn to communicate differently, what works and what doesn't work, and how you need to change. And it's been a really cool adventure for us to figure out, and cool to see this flourish and to know that we did it together, and that's a really cool feeling.
And you primarily work in the tasting room and deal with a lot of the customers that come in.
Yeah. So I manage our tasting room, our wine club, our business, financials, some employees that we have, which are mostly family, but we're hiring more now. So yeah, it's awesome. It's cool. I think my favorite thing is to share our wine, but to hear people laugh and spend time with each other and hear, it's really neat.
I'm sure you get to hear a lot of their stories. And
yeah.
It's just probably nice to hear some good things about the wine that's being made here.
Yeah, definitely. It's awesome because people love the wine, and Kyle's not here super often, and so I try and tell him all the time, people are loving the wine, they're, raving about it, and it's cool when he does come in and work, and people say it, and he gets to see it and hear it.
Yeah. And you said, is it Tempranillo?
Tempranillo,
is that what you kind of started on?
Yeah, that's what I looked for first, yeah. And a lot of that is from an internship that I had in France, in one of their vineyards in Saint-Emilion. We would take trips down to Rioja and other parts of Spain. I fell in love with the wines, especially some of the value of the wines, and then, a lot of them are blends, but they're Tempranillo dominant blends, or just 100% Tempranillo.
Right.
I don't know what it is about the grape. Maybe it's the name at first. Just it's fun to say, but to me, it's a complete wine. Yeah.
How does it do in this area?
I think great, and I think you're seeing more plantings now. Finally, I think a lot of wineries. I think there's just over 100 wineries now making a varietal Tempranillo, and that's great, and people are responding really well to it. So,
how does it compare to other reds that you see here?
I call it Spain's Cabernet when somebody asks. It's so good as a blender. It's a very versatile grape. It has a very distinct flavor profile, and it's really fun to work with. I love it. Yeah.
Tell me more about the name and how you came up with that.
Longship, yeah. So when I was 14, I had a trip to California to see one of my aunts, and she happened to be the keeper of the family book that I knew nothing about. So I sat down with her and my cousins, and she's like, "This is where all your family came from," and it traced back to a little homestead in Norway. And ever since then, I've been very into that part of our heritage, and I never was before. So when it came time to name the winery, that was one of the first things that came to mind. Let's make it about, who we are, where we came from, and kind of honor those people as well. Make it about the family. My last name is Welch, and I wouldn't put that on a wine bottle.
Right.
Just the grape juice jokes wouldn't stop.
Exactly.
So we went with that. And for me, I love branding. I was a business major, kind of focused on marketing. So I like to play with, labels, icons, fanciful names.
Yeah.
All of our wines kind of tell a unique story about either someone in our family or a weird part of our personality. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if you look at the labels, there's something different on each label.
yeah, for instance, like Tempranillo, we call Invader because that's how I see Tempranillo in Washington, is like the invader of the vineyards, because you're going to start seeing more plantings once you taste it.
Yeah.
And then like the Ginger Man is our Syrah, and those were our first 2 wines. And the Syrah is named after my brother Jeff because he has an orange beard, so we call him the Ginger Man.
And
He
then
loves it.
on the back
He
it
loves
says
it.
"Beware the Ginger Man" because it's his older brother.
Yeah.
So, it's
Oh my
appropriate.
goodness.
So they might not make sense when you
Yeah.
look at the label, but they might entice some questions.
Right.
And that's what we like.
So you have some
Yeah.
people asking, okay, where did this come from?
Right.
I'm sure you get that a lot here in the tasting room.
Yeah, we do. And it's fun to tell the story. And it's cool because people will relate to different stories about the wines, and and that's neat because then they fall in love with how it tastes, but then they fall in love with the story behind it too.
So now you guys have a new tasting room. They expanded your tasting room, I
Definitely.
should say. So people if they haven't been in quite a while, they should head back and see what's happening here.
Absolutely. It's a
Yeah.
lot more spacious, a lot more comfortable. And
Yeah, when we opened our tasting room, we didn't really, know what we were doing. We've never done it before, and so we have, higher tables, bar stools, and people, wanted a comfier place to sit. And so it's awesome that we actually have more space now. And so we put in comfy couches and chairs and a big community-style table. And it's really fun to watch people come in who've been, with us the last 2.5, 3 years, and they're just floored by coming in and seeing more space. And it's good. It feels good.
Yeah.
so a great way to start out in the wine industry is to get licensed in someone else's building, and try to save some of those costs and put it towards making a better product. And that's kind of the way that we went. But now we're getting to the size and scope that we're looking at needing our own building, and that's a challenge in this.
Right. So
Yeah.
you want to continue to make or add on more wines to what you already do.
Or at least, if not more varietals, then just more of what we have, definitely.
How has that been for you though, as far as managing and dealing with all those?
It's been great. It's been a learning and building experience for me. Last year I had to have my first harvest intern, so I had to start training and just trying to figure out how to train, because it's a lot harder than, or at least for some people like me. But I like to train by showing and not as much talking, so that's always a challenge. But just learning how to manage people and to give things away, because it's your baby, and that's been the hardest part, is just having to learn how to trust other people to do what you would do.
Right.
Because it is an art and a science, and your life's work. So, but it's been really rewarding to be able to train and show people how to do things, how to run a winery. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so, being in the tasting room, do you find that people kind of go towards one wine versus the other, that they might have maybe a little bit of favorite, or what are your thoughts on that?
It totally depends on the day, on the people.
Really?
Yeah, we'll see one day one wine will sell, we'll sell a ton of it, and the other wines we won't sell as many, but then it'll change to the next day. But yeah, it's really cool to have so many varieties for people to offer, or to have, and it's cool. We do a lot of tasting pairing events where we will pair chocolate or cheese or Girl Scout cookies with wines. And that
Off-the-wall kind of
off
stuff.
the wall kind
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
We have a popcorn one in December that's phenomenal. It's my favorite. But it's cool because it's fun to create an experience for people to try the wine and then try the product, the popcorn, whatever, and then try the wine again and see how it changes.
Right.
And that's been super fun to do over the last couple years. And so we do, I think we're our chocolate one, we'll be doing our 4th one next year. And it's cool because people come back and get to try it and try new wines with the chocolates.
And the pairings are really fun because
Yeah.
chocolate and wine, it's really the weirdest flavored chocolate you can find.
Really?
Yeah. So we'll buy campfire chocolate. S'mores is pretty basic, but there's some other ones like
bacon.
firecracker or bacon infused chocolate. So we order all this chocolate and sit down and try to pair them all with our wines. And I think for people to come in and see that you can have wine with everyday things and not necessarily a fancy dinner, that's just kind of that's the kind of stuff we like.
Yeah, because wine is fun and it should be approachable, and we like to create that experience here.